Today, I'm going to reveal 3 laws of copywriting that will fundamentally change the way that you approach writing copy forever. Just like how Newton's laws of motion lay out the rules for how physicists, mathematicians, and engineers deal with objects in the physical world, these laws of copywriting lay the foundation for how to actually create effective communication that drives the results that you are looking for. So if you're a copywriter, a marketer, or anyone else working in the fields of communication, make sure you know and do not violate these laws. Let's begin at the top with the first law of copywriting, the law of simplicity. You can go back through time and study all the greatest copywriters who've published books, all the Dan Kennedys, the David Ogilvy's, all of them of all time, and they all will tell you one piece of advice. You've got to keep it simple. You've got to make your marketing messaging so easy to consume that you don't even know that you're consuming it. And this is the foundational law of all of copywriting. You can go into almost any piece of copy that people are writing and just take the ideas, take what is in the communication that's being passed along to the consumer and just make it a little bit simpler to understand, and instantly you will see a boost in response. And that's why it's one of the most important laws, because when we are creating copy, we are not trying to get people to think, we are trying to get them to act. In order to get them out of that thinking brain and to get them into the emotional responses we're trying to trigger, we need to make sure what we say and how we say it is as simple as it can possibly be. And in fact, they've actually done studies on this. If you've been in the copywriting world for quite some time, you've probably heard of the big direct response publishing house called Agora. They produce billions of dollars a year in info product sales, and they have some of the greatest copywriters in the world amongst their ranks. And one of the things that they've tried to do throughout time is they've tried to really get to the essence. Like, what are those ideas? What are the things in their copy that just make it explode, take off and generate tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales versus the campaigns that kind of flop? And so they had someone go into actually all the promotions and actually dig through all of the data on it. And what they were actually trying to do was actually look for patterns. Is there one commonality? Is there one thing between all of our hit promotions that we could actually find and then actually replicate going forward? Some people speculated it would be the best big ideas, or it would have an insane deadline attached to the top, or it would be based on some up and coming technology, or maybe it was actually the way it was written. And one of the things that they found was that many of these things that people assumed to be true were quickly not. Some promotions succeeded without deadlines, some ran for full years without ever actually fully expiring. And so what they ended up actually finding after they dug through hundreds of promotions through the archives is that there was one commonality between all of the hit promotions, and that was it. There's one thing in between them all, and it was that they were written on a 5th grade level or below. Now, why is that important to us marketers, us copywriters? Because simplicity is power. Being able to take big ideas and communicate them clearly to audiences that didn't have to study what you were saying like they were going back through college algebra class, just communicating the ideas very simply instantly gave it power. I work with a lot of students one-on-one and actually helping them actually review their copy, and they turn it into me, and sometimes I'll actually make some edits to it and send them back a new version of the draft, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. What'd you do this, Rob? And the only thing I did is throw it in the Hemingway app and actually simplify the copy down. Make sure that it was written on like a 2nd or 3rd grade level. Take it down from like an 8th grade reading level all the way down to a 2, and you will just see the copy just becomes exponentially more crisp. Because why? Because it's just that much more polished. Every idea is so easy to consume. One of my copywriting mentors used to say to me, he said, I want you to write your emails in a way where once they open it up, it would be almost impossible not to consume it with, short sentences. All of it right there inside of one little bite-sized email, very simple to understand. You don't have to be dedicating 95% of your mental energy to this. You could consume the message. You could probably, start to experience some of the emotional response without actually diving really deep into the words. So if you have copy and you just follow this first law, the law of simplicity, you will exponentially be better than your competition. So follow the law of simplicity if you want to succeed, but by itself, it's just one part of actually copywriting success. So that brings us to law number 2, the law of belief. One of my first copywriting mentors, Will Green, actually told me, he said, if you learn nothing else from me, I want you to remember this one phrase. Copywriting is the scripted transfer of belief in a promise that, if true, leads to inevitable action. And inside of that little tiny phrase is actually the core of what all of copywriting is. It is the scripted transfer of beliefs in a promise. So you're making promises and you need people to believe you. So you have to provide proof for these things. And if you show them that it's true, then action becomes inevitable. And this is one of the laws that you definitely want to commit to memory, because you need to learn how belief gets built. Because if we take a look at what copywriting is at its essence, it's getting people to take action, getting people motivated to do things in droves. And so what are some of the best examples of this of all time? You might say movies, you might say religion, you might say, very popular books, you might say there's whole movements of things that have gotten people to take action. And at the core of almost all of these things is the desire to take action based on beliefs that people hold. Politics is really great about doing this. It's constantly instilling beliefs and getting people to believe those beliefs and take action based on it. And so if you take a look at copywriting, you need to study how belief gets built. You need to go under the hood of psychology and see, how do I go in and actually make people believe statements that I say? Do I go in and actually provide proof? Do I demonstrate things? Do I go in and actually show my product actually providing tangible results for people? Some of the best advertisements of all time are actually scripted infomercials. And when we watch these things today, we probably cringe just a little bit, but those are copywriting geniuses at play, because what are they doing? They're actually showing you the products and how they can work for people and actually showing people with testimonials. One of my favorite advertisements, I've probably studied it hundreds of times, is that P90X ad that used to run like clockwork all day, every day. It was one of the most famous infomercials of the past 10 years. And one of the things you'll see in that advertisement is constant demonstration, constant proof, constant making you believe that this 90-day transformation is possible. And that product went on to do billions and billions of dollars in sales, all because if you really study that advertisement, if you really study some different core parts of it, all it is making you believe in that fundamental premise. And if you can make people believe on something, you can get them to take action. And that's really what copywriting is. So studying how belief gets created. And so another thing you can do is actually get other people to actually read your copy and tell them specifically, say, hey, would you mind just highlighting a little bit of sections of this copy and just letting me know I didn't really believe you here. And then going in and actually thinking about how you can layer in proof to your advertisements will make your copy so much better. So one of the biggest mistakes I see so many copywriters making is, making these big claims and then not substantiating them. And the bridge between these two things is the belief that they need to actually ultimately buy the product. And that brings us to law number 3, the law of context. And what this law really means is that you can never write a single word of effective copy without knowing the context of which that copy will be consumed. And this is something I learned the hard way in the early days of my copywriting career. I was just a few months into actually being a copywriter, and I was just doing whatever I could to actually hold my head above water because I was drowning in all the different work I was doing for my clients. My copy chief at the time actually came to me and said, I'm so sorry, Rob. I know you've got so much on your plate right now, but I'm about to give you even more. I'm going to give you this giant funnel and all these assets that go along with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much. I'm so overwhelmed with all I have to write. I was like, just tell me how much you need for each one of these things and I'll just write it down. I was just get ready to go. And he was like, wait, we're gonna really hang up the call right now because you haven't actually asked the most important thing, which was, what is the context of this copy? Who is going to be consuming it? When will it be sent? What pages will these things be going out? What is the word count that we're aiming for? All these different things that I had just glossed right over because I was so focused on the actual task that I forgot to consider the context which the copy would be consumed. And this is so important. So many copywriters skip right over this law, and that's one of the reasons why their advertisements don't convert like they should, because you have to consider context. A couple weeks ago, I was actually chatting with a young copywriter who had just landed this local client who actually runs a bakery, and he'd done a bunch of reading of all these copywriting books and all these things of that nature, and he was like, I'm going to write them this long form sales letter and we're going to use it for a direct mail campaign. As much as I wanted to, just say, yeah, go all out, do the direct response thing, one of the things that I told him, one of the things you may not be considering is how this is going to come across to the end users, the end consumers of this advertisement. You're helping sell donuts at a local coffee shop. Do you really think that the average customer who gets this thick packet in the mail is going to just be ready to read this long form direct response advertisement? Do you think it's necessary to get the response that's required? And he's like, that's what they all used to do back in the day, isn't it? And one of the things that you have to remember is that a lot of those advertisements were attached to information products or books or going into the back of a funnel where they really needed to drive that conversion today. Whereas if you're doing a local ad for a bakery and you're just trying to tell people about free donuts to come in, you can probably just get away with a little pamphlet letter with small design, minimal copy, just say free donuts and just some nice images at the top of the ad. And that is still copywriting. Remember, it has to exist within that context. We don't want to just go hog wild and just start writing things without considering where this medium will be consumed, because the medium is so important to how effective you'll ultimately be. And in fact, you really want your advertisements to blend into the medium so it's almost invisible that it's an ad. Back a couple years ago, it was a big innovation to actually have advertisements in the middle of magazines as advertorials. And actually, they would make them look really similar to the actual articles within the ad because most people just skip right over that page. But if you start reading it and it looks like an article that's kind of embedded inside of this newspaper or this magazine, and then you're like, wait, this is for a product at the end? And they have to disclose that there's an advertisement at the top. But you want it to blend into the medium because most of us have been conditioned to turn off advertising. We don't like to be advertised to. No one likes to be sold to. And so your advertisements need to blend into the context. And the better you can do that, a lot of times videos, the bigger the breakthrough you'll have in the advertisement. You know, one of the things right now that I see is absolutely crushing it is people are actually, shooting VSLs in the format and style like how Joe Rogan does his podcast. Now, some of the smartest advertisers are actually taking their VSLs and scripting them in this way where they're having a podcast host and they're having a person on the other side of the desk and they're just having a conversation. The product comes up naturally, and these things are converting like crazy because it blends into the context. So the number one thing you want to consuming if you want to take into consideration this law is to really always be considering how the ideal audience for your market is, consider how the ideal people in your target market are consuming the medium in which your advertisement will be displayed. And you really want to make sure that yours can blend into that environment without being too much of an interruption that it is an ad. But if you can blend your advertisement into the medium in the way that your ideal target market likes to consume it, that is going to provide those next level results. So I love to, get really familiar with people in my target market. You can read up on forums. You can kind of get a sense for how other brands similar to yours are approaching advertisements in those different mediums, and then make yours blend into that way. So these were the 3 laws of copywriting. By committing these to memory and actually putting them into practice, you'll be exponentially better off. But that doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, because as you get started and as you start practicing writing more copy, you're probably going to make some mistakes. And in fact, there's 7 big ones that I see copywriting rookies make all the time. And in this video, I show you exactly what those mistakes are and exactly how to avoid them so you don't end up like me and cost yourself a lot of money and a lot of clients in the process.